I normally avoid stepping into debates like this. But when the subject is Caitlin Clark, staying quiet no longer feels possible. Welcome back everyone to Clark Update. I hope your day is going incredibly well, because today's story is one you will not want to miss. Especially if you truly support Caitlin and everything she is bringing to basketball. Make sure you remain with us through the final moment because the details become more surprising as this unfolds. Before we begin, show that you are part of the Clark Update Army by writing CC 100% in the comments below. It is always incredible to see so many passionate Clark supporters sharing their thoughts and standing behind her. With that said, there is no reason to delay any longer, so let's get directly into today's story. Michael Jordan did not merely walk toward a microphone and deliver a routine compliment. The moment he began speaking, he commanded the entire situation. What appeared at first to be a simple tribute quickly transformed into one of the most unforgettable basketball statements in recent memory. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham were not merely praised. According to the story surrounding the moment, they were left stunned by the significance of what was being said. Before we continue, support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. More than 90% of the people watching have reportedly not subscribed, even though doing so is completely free and requires only a second. Your support makes an enormous difference and allows us to keep bringing you stories like this. Have you subscribed? Excellent, and thank you. Now let's return to what happened. Jordan reportedly explained their impact with the kind of direct, controlled delivery that made every word feel important. His message was not centered on nostalgia, old championships, or the accomplishments of a previous generation. Instead, he focused on the players carrying basketball in the present and helping shape where the sport goes next. So what exactly made his remarks so powerful? Prepare yourself, because the silence surrounding this moment may have spoken almost as loudly as the words themselves. Jordan rarely offers public commentary about women's basketball, and when he speaks away from the court, he generally chooses his moments carefully. That is why an unscripted acknowledgement of Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham immediately attracted attention. There was supposedly no elaborate stage, promotional campaign, or dramatic announcement. He simply recognized two competitors whose influence is helping redefine excellence in the modern game. The importance came not only from the fact that he spoke, but from the qualities he chose to highlight. Caitlin Clark's name already carries enormous recognition. Her transition into the WNBA brought extraordinary attention, record-setting audiences, packed buildings, rising merchandise demand, and television numbers the league had rarely experienced. Yet Jordan's alleged assessment looked beyond those obvious measurements. Rather than focusing only on her statistics, shooting range, or selection of shots, he pointed towards something more difficult to measure: her presence. Clark enters a game and appears to understand the temperature of the moment immediately. Some athletes gradually become comfortable under intense attention, but she appeared to arrive already prepared for it. Her ability to control pace, anticipate movement, create opportunities, and pull defenses far beyond their normal structure has produced comparisons with elite basketball players from every era, male and female. Her extraordinary court vision and seemingly limitless range have helped turn her into one of the sport's most recognizable attractions. Jordan's words, however, supposedly offered something different from another comparison. They represented validation from a figure whose understanding of competitive influence is nearly unmatched. He was not simply describing Clark as a distant promise for women's basketball. The suggestion was that she is already one of the clearest expressions of basketball's present. Then the focus reportedly shifted towards Sophie Cunningham, and the tone remained just as serious. Cunningham may not attract the same level of non-stop national coverage, but Jordan allegedly recognized that her effect on winning can be equally meaningful. She was characterized as a force who changes the emotional rhythm of a contest the moment she enters it. Instead of chasing headlines, she attacks assignments, absorbs contact, pressures opponents, and accepts responsibilities other players might avoid. Her persistence, physical edge, and refusal to surrender were presented as the qualities separating serious competitors from ordinary participants. Sophie approaches games as though every possession carries a personal challenge. Coming from Jordan, whose career was powered by an almost obsessive response to rivalry, that kind of observation would mean far more than a casual compliment. Cunningham was not being celebrated because of celebrity, popularity, or marketing power. The recognition centered on the fire beneath every rebound, screen, rotation, loose ball pursuit, and defensive stand. This was framed not as a publicity stunt or brand partnership, but as an authentic acknowledgement from someone who has viewed basketball from nearly every possible angle. In Clark and Cunningham, Jordan supposedly saw more than talent. He saw evidence that basketball's next major chapter is not waiting somewhere in the distance. It has already begun. With only a handful of carefully chosen remarks, he appeared to cut through years of arguments surrounding women's sports, visibility, respect, and legitimacy. Without a giant campaign or choreographed announcement, his voice reportedly made people feel that the balance was changing. When someone with Jordan's stature speaks, even quietly, the basketball world listens. But was this unexpected endorsement merely encouragement, or did it signal the beginning of something considerably larger? Pay close attention. because the reactions that followed added an entirely new dimension. Greatness often recognizes qualities that resemble its own, and other legends have reportedly begun weighing in. Larry Bird, another icon who rarely distributes unnecessary praise, offered one of the most unexpected yet revealing responses. Known for his reserved personality and his ability to recognize authentic basketball intelligence, Bird did more than casually mention Clark. He connected the way she plays with the style of basketball that shaped his own rise. Bird reportedly admitted, almost in passing, that he watched far more Iowa games during the 2023-24 season than he originally expected. He recognized elements of Clark's performance that reminded him of his own college years at Indiana State. That was not simply sentimental reflection. For a player whose reputation was built on precision, endurance, creativity, competitive nerve, and an extraordinary reading of the floor, the comparison communicated deep respect. Through a restrained but meaningful acknowledgement, Bird's message appeared clear. Clark was not merely dominating a category of college basketball. She was affecting how the entire sport could be understood. Bird was not the only towering figure joining the growing conversation. Shaquille O'Neal, long associated with LSU and openly supportive of Angel Reese, reportedly experienced an unexpected change in perspective. At first, many viewers considered Shaq firmly aligned with one of Clark's most prominent rivals. Yet during a broadcast he paused and admitted something many people had begun to suspect. He had become fascinated by Caitlin Clark's game. He did not present himself as an analyst delivering a detached breakdown. He spoke like a genuine fan. His statement that he was not speaking as Shaq in that moment, but simply as someone watching and enjoying basketball, established the emotional tone for everything that followed. He acknowledged that he had initially wondered whether Clark's enormous television reputation could match what she actually delivered on the floor. Once he watched closely, however, he found little room left for debate. Her command, vision, decision-making, and leadership stood out. She was not just collecting numbers or manufacturing highlight clips. She repeatedly identified the correct basketball play. Hearing that from one of the most dominant players in NBA history carried special significance. Shaq revolutionized the center position through overwhelming power, intimidation, awareness, and championship production. His praise was therefore framed as both confirmation and revelation. Yet these responses are not occurring in isolation, and that makes the larger story even more important. While Clark's creativity and star power dominate public attention, Cunningham is receiving admiration for qualities that rarely appear as glamorous: reliability, toughness, effort, and consistency. Clark's brilliance may attract the cameras, but Sophie's resilience often earns respect from the people watching behind the scenes. Jordan supposedly emphasized that distinction, while Bird and Shaq understand it from their own playing experiences. As Clark and Cunningham follow different but complementary paths, some of basketball's most recognizable names are reconsidering what excellence looks like in this era. Their opinions matter, because these legends understand the emotional and physical demands required to guide a team, carry a city, or transform an entire league. As the spotlight intensified, one question became impossible to ignore. Would the real story be told by spectacular plays, or by the people who appeared when pressure was greatest? Do not look away, because the direction changes again. Why have Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham become such compelling figures to basketball legends? Conversations are evolving in arenas, studios, locker rooms, and fan communities. Not merely because of publicity, but because the two players bring distinctly valuable qualities to the game. They are redefining what it means to compete, lead, absorb pressure, and elevate a league while operating with dramatically different styles. Clark plays with transition speed, creative passing, fearless range, and an ability to bend defensive coverage. Cunningham brings veteran toughness, physical resistance, emotional intensity, and a willingness to engage in the difficult work. Legends are interested in more than their box score production. They are responding to substance. Tyrese Halliburton appears to recognize it clearly. The Indiana Pacers guard understands what it means to carry the expectations of a city, and he has described Clark less like a distant celebrity and more like a fellow point guard trying to guide a team. His support goes beyond a meaningless gesture. He attends games, acknowledges the responsibility Clark shoulders in Indiana, and appreciates the pressure created by her arrival. The Fever became a central attraction while still trying to develop into a consistent contender, placing an unusual amount of responsibility on a young player. Halliburton respects not merely Clark's skill but the burden attached to it. That is leadership being recognized across leagues and generations. The attraction surrounding Clark also extends beyond fans and local athletes. It could influence how players think about free agency and team construction. Commentator Jason Whitlock has argued that players want the opportunity to compete beside her. Whether everyone agrees with that conclusion or not, the idea cuts through much of the surrounding noise. In a league where roster chemistry can determine everything, Clark has become an undeniable point of attraction. The conversation is no longer limited to market size, advertising budgets, or geography. Players also consider culture, trust, discipline, visibility, opportunity, and the chance to compete in an environment with direction. Clark has increasingly become associated with those qualities. Yet she is not the only Indiana player pulling attention toward the Fever. When Sophie Cunningham arrived through a trade in 2025, she was not brought in simply to disappear into the rotation. She came to alter the team's emotional rhythm. If Clark represents the league's highly visible future, Cunningham could become one of the crucial pieces helping protect and stabilize that future. Her journey from Missouri to Phoenix and eventually Indiana was never centered on glamorous headlines. It was built on force, work, survival, and adaptability. Sophie may not produce 30 points every night, but she can energize a locker room, absorb contact, take a charge, pressure an opponent, hit an important three-pointer, and shift the mood of a game. Her defensive approach is suffocating, and her energy spreads quickly. During a heated contest in June, Cunningham raced across the floor after Clark received a hard foul, immediately placing herself between her teammate and the escalating confrontation. The point was not theatrical drama. It was the message behind her response. Sophie was defending more than one teammate in one isolated moment. She was reinforcing a culture Indiana hoped to build around unity, courage, accountability, and mutual protection. Her complete value does not always fit into a statistical summary, but it can be felt across nearly every possession. She pursues loose balls, communicates rotations, challenges teammates, confronts opponents, and changes momentum without requiring her name to appear at the top of every graphic. That is precisely why former greats may be paying attention. They are not supporting Clark and Cunningham simply because they are WNBA players. They recognize something deeper: genuine resolve, unfiltered toughness, and leadership that remains visible when the atmosphere becomes uncomfortable. This is not being portrayed as a passing trend. It is a broader shift defined not only by who scores, but by who earns and commands respect when consequences are real. Both women have already experienced moments that revealed their character. For Clark, one of the most important arrived away from the court through a list that did not include her name. When the United States roster for the 2024 Paris Olympics was announced and Clark was absent, the reaction surrounding women's basketball was immediate. Here was the player who had energized college arenas, helped break audience records, and pushed women's basketball deeper into mainstream discussion. Yet she would not participate on the sport's largest international stage. Supporters expressed anger and disappointment, but Clark refused to intensify the controversy. Rather than launching public attacks, she returned to work. The omission, intentional or otherwise, gave her something extremely valuable: uninterrupted space. Without the non-stop Olympic schedule and daily media frenzy, she could focus on training, film study, conditioning, recovery, and adjustment to professional basketball. There were fewer cameras following every movement and fewer urgent reports speculating about her next decision. There was only repetition, sweat, analysis, and the steady routine of an athlete converting frustration into preparation. Dwight Howard, watching the situation from outside, reportedly treated the omission as a test and did not expect Clark to collapse beneath it. He anticipated that she would adapt and grow. Meanwhile, criticism of the league's handling of Clark spread across the wider basketball community. Former NBA guard Jeff Teague argued that the WNBA had mishandled a significant opportunity, both through the Olympic decision and through what he considered a failure to fully embrace the influence she was already generating. Attendance was rising, merchandise was spreading, ticket demand was climbing, and broadcasts were receiving unprecedented interest. Clark was no longer simply a highly talented rookie. She had become a focal point for a movement. Still, the reception she experienced during games sometimes appeared less like a welcoming transition and more like a warning from established competitors. Hall of Famer Rick Barry, a player familiar with the physical basketball of earlier generations, reportedly suggested that some defenders' treatment of Clark appeared personal. Such an assessment carried weight coming from someone who competed during one of basketball's most unforgiving periods. Yet Clark continued avoiding complaints. She absorbed contact, hostility, dismissive reactions, and aggressive challenges, answering through passes, shots, and decisions instead of escalating every issue through interviews. It looked like a quiet form of rebellion. If Clark represented calm within the turbulence, Cunningham often represented the turbulence itself. When Indiana struggled with inconsistency early in the season, Sophie did not pretend the problems were insignificant. Following a frustrating defeat in June 2025, she publicly challenged the team's inability to perform with consistency. Her words were not designed as a polite question. They were a demand directed toward herself, her teammates, and the coaching staff. That kind of intensity was supported by action. When Clark was absent during a preseason contest, Cunningham helped carry the moment, confidently converting the free throws that forced overtime and contributed to a win. When Indiana suffered an ugly home loss while shooting around 30%, Sophie did not hide from disappointed supporters. She said the team owed them more. The statement did not sound rehearsed or polished by a communications department. It sounded immediate and honest, and the locker room heard it. Her own breakthrough arrived against Atlanta when she produced her first double-double of the season with 16 points and 10 rebounds. She responded with a smile and a simple acknowledgement that it had taken long enough. The humor was mixed with self-accountability. Cunningham was not chasing statistics for personal celebration. She was competing for connection, responsibility, team identity, and the supporters who remained in the building through difficult stretches. Her contribution extended far beyond her minutes or official role. She was gradually becoming an emotional compass for the Fever. When the room became quiet, she spoke. When the team's intensity faded, she supplied energy. When Clark encountered criticism from opponents, media voices, and skeptics, Sophie remained close enough to help protect both her teammate and the team's momentum. If those experiences changed how the outside world perceived them, could Cunningham's future influence also alter the balance of power throughout women's basketball? Stay focused, because the next part expands beyond one team. Beneath the attention surrounding Clark, a larger commercial and cultural shift is developing. She did not merely break individual records during her first WNBA season. Her arrival helped transform the business surrounding the league. After Indiana selected her first overall in 2024, regular season broadcasts attracted enormous audiences, and buildings that once struggled to fill seats began selling out or moving games into larger venues. The effect extended beyond what happened between the lines. Clark's digital popularity, cultural significance, and ability to generate conversation brought the WNBA into spaces where it had previously received limited attention. Alongside that visible force stood Cunningham, a veteran who had experienced a very different version of professional women's basketball. Sophie spent years dealing with financial limitations, inconsistent exposure, and the reality that many WNBA players relied on overseas contracts during the offseason to maximize their earnings. Her career included seasons when television audiences were smaller, promotional resources were restricted, and mainstream attention arrived only occasionally. She therefore contributes more than experience. She understands the actual cost of surviving and building a career in this league. Together, Cunningham and Clark represent a combination the WNBA has rarely possessed: unprecedented commercial influence paired with a veteran understanding of the league's long-standing hardships. Their growing partnership could affect more than the Fever's results. It may create a foundation for conversations involving compensation, working standards, player safety, travel, medical support, career resources, and long-term league development. These concerns are not theoretical for Cunningham because she has lived through them. Clark, meanwhile, now possesses an extraordinary platform from which they can be discussed. Her marketability has already disrupted conventional assumptions about the league's business ceiling. Her appearances increase demand not only in Indiana but in cities across the schedule. Her social reach competes with prominent athletes from much larger leagues, while her merchandise, endorsements, and sponsorship appeal provide influence extending into media, culture, and brand strategy. The crucial question is how that influence will be used. Will it serve only Clark's personal advancement, or can it support structural progress throughout women's basketball? Veterans such as Cunningham could prove essential to that possibility. Young stars may attract public attention, but experienced players understand where reform is most urgently required. Cunningham has previously supported long-term improvements and participated as a meaningful voice among players. Together, the two women may represent more than individual success. They could signal the arrival of an era in which players exercise greater control over the league's direction. Yet beneath the applause and admiration, another form of tension continues to grow, one that cannot be erased by headlines or covered by cheering crowds. The excitement surrounding Clark has become a spark challenging a system that was not prepared to elevate one player this rapidly. Every deep three, transition pass, sold-out building, and massive television audience increases the pressure. Clark did not gradually climb a traditional ladder of WNBA recognition. She appeared to bypass entire stages of it. Jordan supposedly understood the disruptive nature of that rise. His reference to her competitive fire was therefore framed as more than praise. It sounded almost like a warning about the discomfort created when attention suddenly moves. He was not discussing only missed defensive assignments or intimidated opponents. He was pointing toward the uneasiness experienced by people who watch the center of a sport shift in real time. Jordan recognized more than Clark's talent. He understood the storm surrounding her. His own emergence transformed the identity and commercial future of the NBA. And he could see elements of that disruptive possibility in what Clark was doing for a league that had spent years searching for a defining mainstream breakthrough. However, extraordinary visibility always carries a price. Not everyone standing near the flames welcomes the heat. The reaction could be insecurity, competitiveness, jealousy, or a desire to test a heavily promoted newcomer. Whatever the motivation, Clark's introduction to the league has rarely felt gentle. She has absorbed unnecessary contact, heard players minimize her accomplishments, and watched commentators question whether her reputation exceeded her performance. Some dismiss everything as ordinary competitive basketball. Others believe the situation carries additional meaning. Cunningham understands the grind of being overlooked, taking contact without cameras noticing, and fighting for recognition without receiving instant rewards. She also understands how destructive resentment can become when it is allowed to spread. After years of watching the league struggle for attention, resources and respect, Sophie appears to recognize what Clark's moment could represent. It can either deepen divisions or create enough leverage to strengthen everyone. That is what separates Cunningham's perspective. She does not automatically retreat from the pressure. She has experienced it herself and understands its weight. She may never generate Clark's volume of headlines, but she can see beyond the noise. Where others interpret the attention as a threat, Sophie seems capable of recognizing an opportunity to improve salaries, secure better exposure, expand primetime coverage, and transform working conditions. Still, the friction is real. Ratings are increasing. Courtside seats are becoming more valuable, and sponsors are offering levels of investment the WNBA rarely experienced before. Magic Johnson compared Clark's arrival to the moment he and Larry Bird entered the NBA and helped produce a dramatic turning point. The comparison was enormous, but the commercial evidence made it difficult to dismiss completely. Games involving Clark have challenged or surpassed audiences for established men's sporting events, while new sponsorship money and private travel improvements have entered the league's conversation. National campaigns, endorsement opportunities, and constant exposure have reached an entirely different scale. Clark remains at the center of that expansion, and that central position creates complications. Stephen Curry, another superstar who changed how basketball understands shooting range, has praised Clark not merely for viral attempts from deep, but for her management of the floor. That distinction carried tremendous weight. Curry understands that extraordinary distance attracts attention, but control, decision-making, movement, and awareness are what make a player truly transformative. Fans have naturally imagined the two shooters eventually meeting in some kind of competitive exhibition, and although Clark has remained careful when discussing the possibility, the idea continues hovering in the background. Yet nothing defines this period more clearly than the transformation of tension into momentum. Clark is emerging as the highly visible face while Cunningham acts as a connecting bridge. One attracts attention, and the other helps direct and protect the energy created by it. One studies and controls, while the other confronts and ignites. Whether they planned it or not, their partnership is helping redirect women's basketball. As their influence grows, the questions become more urgent. Is the league truly celebrating this expansion, or is part of it resisting the shift internally? The debate is no longer only about competition. It is about who will influence the sport's future. Clark and Cunningham's resistance is often quieter than the headlines suggest, but its effect is becoming increasingly visible. Clark is not merely participating in the WNBA. She is changing the environment around it. Her clips dominate social platforms. Her jersey remains in enormous demand, and her appearances transform ordinary games into major events. Yet increased fame brings increased strain. Comments from figures such as Cheryl Swoops, warnings associated with Diana Taurasi, and the distant tones sometimes attributed to Cheryl Reeve have all been interpreted by fans as signs of deeper discomfort. Some people view Clark as an unprecedented opportunity. Others see her rise as creating an imbalance in attention and influence. Through it all, she continues appearing composed, determined, and strategically aware. Her basketball answers often speak louder than the doubts. She creates opportunities for teammates, makes intelligent reads, handles pressure, and delivers during critical stretches. Support from legends such as Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan is not generally offered without reason. They recognize patterns that casual viewers may overlook. Shaq, despite previously being closely associated with support for Angel Reese, openly acknowledged the consistency of Clark's decision-making. But beside Clark on the floor, Cunningham provides the voice unwilling to retreat. Sophie is rarely subtle. She communicates directly, competes with visible emotion, and refuses to soften every reaction. She knows how it feels to be evaluated unfairly, and she can recognize when Clark's intensity is being interpreted through a different standard. Where critics describe entitlement, Cunningham sees concentration. Where others interpret arrogance, she identifies precision and competitive certainty. Sophie has not been afraid to challenge that narrative, even when doing so risks placing her against other players or popular opinions. Their relationship is therefore more than ordinary partnership. It resembles shared defiance against expectations imposed from outside and within. Cunningham understands that Clark is carrying far more than the typical responsibility assigned to a young point guard. She has become an unofficial spokesperson for a league suddenly receiving levels of scrutiny it never previously faced. After seeing the criticism, physical targeting, and uneven treatment, Sophie has repeatedly chosen not to remain silent. Together they are more than teammates, and they are not defined simply as rivals to the rest of the league. They are catalysts accelerating a transformation already in motion. Not everyone will agree with Clark's influence or Cunningham's methods, but the sport is undeniably advancing around them. Sophie is attempting to ensure that the real story, performance, development, opportunity, labor progress, and a future dramatically different from the league's past is not buried beneath constant noise. So where do you stand? Are Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham helping move women's basketball toward a stronger future, or are their bold actions creating divisions that could become harder to repair? Share your honest opinion in the comments because we want to hear every perspective. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next Clark update. Thank you for